is Bergie Miller. I am the Executive Director of the Ding Darling Wildlife Society, which is the nonprofit friends group supporting the refuge. And there's a little video that does a much better job of telling you who we are as an organization. But as an organization, we really depend so much on philanthropy and support to help the refuge do their mission and do their work of conservation and education and habitat protection and buying land and all sorts of things. And it takes philanthropy. And our lecture series is sponsored by an anonymous donor and also Hightower financial advisors. So Jack Thomas and Trevor Schwartz, wonderful people. They've been longtime supporters of the Ding Darling Wildlife Society and the lecture series. Jack grew up on Woodring Point, and that was an area where the Ding Darling Wildlife Society worked to raise money to acquire that land to protect it from being built anymore upon. And he remembers it as a kid, and he understands and values having places like Ding Darling and other natural spaces throughout our country, and they're wonderful supporters. So Hightower Advisors, they're great. But we're excited to be here today, and before I introduce our wonderful speaker, I'm going to show a little video about who we are.
The J.N. Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge of today isn't here by chance. In the early 1940s, J. Norwood Darling, for whom the refuge is now named, was instrumental in the effort to block the sale of environmentally valuable land to developers. Ultimately, at his urging, President Harry S. Truman signed an executive order creating this refuge in 1945. In 1982, the Ding Darling Wildlife Society Friends of the Refuge began. Its purpose was to educate visitors about the importance of protecting lands, waters, and wildlife. In 1999, this group of volunteers stepped up to lead the building of the refuge's Visitor and Education Center. This was the first partnership of its kind, where a friends group raised money to construct a federal building. And it is still the hub of the refuge today. Why was this necessary? And what is the Society's role today? Well, over the decades, the refuge budget has been cut 60%, and it has half the staff it formerly did. Meanwhile, visitors have increased 66% to nearly 1 million people annually. The refuge cannot meet their growing needs alone. So the Ding Darling Wildlife Society works to fill in the gaps where federal funding falls short. Most importantly, the refuge keeps Ding Darling's spirit alive by educating generation after generation about the importance of conservation, so visitors from around the world will take that knowledge back to the communities where they live. Today, with the help of generous donors, the Society supports the refuge in these primary areas: land acquisition and restoration, advocacy, conservation education, wildlife protection, biology and water quality research, and internships.
What really draws people to Sanibel and the core objective of people is to come and enjoy the J.N. Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. I think Ding Darling would just be ecstatic over the fact that there are people that are carrying on his legacy. I mean, he obviously gave from his pocketbook, gave from his heart, but he would be ever so gratified to know that that legacy that he started continues today.
The best legacies are not what you do for yourself today, but what you do for the next generation.
I wanted to be at the refuge because there were things that I could do here. So every time I come to volunteer, I see the important work that's being done by the Ding Darling Wildlife Society. I see the smile on children's faces and families who are enjoying nature and wildlife. It is so wonderful, it really is, to know that all of this work will be protected for the next generation because of the work that the Society has accomplished. Because if we don't do it, who will? Who will do it?
To that end, the Ding Darling Wildlife Society is dedicated to ensuring that Ding's legacy lives on at the JN Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. We invite you to join us and our thousands of members in supporting the refuge for generations to come.
So that's who we are. And if you're not a member, we'd love to have you join us. If you want to receive our e-newsletter, I know many of you do receive that, our Ding on the Wing. It goes out on Thursdays, weekly during season and bi-weekly during the off season. It just is full of information of things that are going on at the refuge and beyond. The sign-up sheet for that is up front, so I encourage you to sign up for Ding on the Wing if you're not getting it. And then if you're busy and you don't have time to read, click delete. And then when you do have time, you can read it again. But we're doing so much with the Society as a result of philanthropy because they see the work that the refuge does and can't do because of the lack of funding and support. So we're also doing significant outreach off-island as well. There's a lot of kids that can't get here by school bus that we bring in time to get back at school, to get their school bus to go back home. So we're trying to bring the refuge out to them in that way as well. So lots of things to do to inspire that next generation, and our speaker today is one of those people working very hard to do just that, not only in writing wonderful books and guides and all of that, but he's very involved in advocacy and getting people learning to love wildlife and nature and birds. But Richard Crossley is an internationally acclaimed birder, photographer, and award-winning author of the Crossley ID Guide series. Born in Yorkshire, England, he moved to Cape May, USA in 1991 after falling in love with birding and the town. After 20 years of hiding in the business world, Richard co-authored the successful Shorebird Guide. He quickly became obsessed with the newfound opportunities provided by digital technology, Photoshop, and book design. The Crossley ID Guide series was then created. He is also co-founder of the Global Birding Initiative, Pledge to Fledge, Race for Birds, and the Cape May Young Birders Club. He has contributed to most major birding publications and is frequently heard on radio. He served on the board of directors of the famous Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. He's wildly passionate and driven and describes his love of birding and the outdoors as he describes it. He firmly believes that the time is right to popularize birding in the USA and other parts of the world. Richard will be speaking today on the past, present, and future of birding through conservation. Please join me in welcoming Richard Crossley.
Good morning, everybody. Is that really me? Thank you for coming out. It's a little different these days with COVID and masks, so I do appreciate you coming out. A lot of places are not doing live events, and which frankly I hate. It is important that we can come out, and so I really want to thank Bergie, Ding Darling for doing this, because they're sort of taking a bit of a chance. It's absolutely fantastic, and I actually think necessary. It's funny, we stood outside and we were talking about America and the different reserves and places, and Ding Darling is quite probably, if not the best, one of the best few in the country for just how much impact it has on the local environment and the people. I believe you have, well, at the moment over a couple of hundred volunteers, but when there's not COVID around, over 400 active volunteers. So I don't think anywhere else in the country does a job like that. So any volunteers here today? Well, thank you. I will say that. Thank you very much for doing that. So it makes a massive difference, and we need role models. And I certainly think Ding Darling and the incredible job that they do is acting as a role model. The world is a lot smaller than what we think, so you'd be surprised who is watching you. So in any case, today's talk, as she said, is past, present and future. It's the influences of the past that shape who we are. It's what we do today that will shape the future tomorrow. So tonight I'd like to, tonight I'm used to speaking in the evening obviously, this morning I would like to tell you of the influences of my past and you know, some of the things I'm doing today and what others are doing and what my dreams are and hopes are for the future. So sit back and relax. Late December back in '63, I was born in Yorkshire, Northern England. My mother said I was a beautiful baby. She, just like all of you, was completely biased. You see, we are all biased by where we are brought up, by the culture that we come from, by our parents, by TV, and everything that is around us. Understanding that bias, in most cases your American bias, is very important to how you think and where we can go. In any case, my bias was living with my parents and being brought up on a farm, and I'm sure that's where my love of nature and the outdoors began. Ironically, we lived in a very remote forest, and my dad collected eggs as a kid. His dad had collected eggs as a kid, much like actually hunting in America. It's a family tradition often. And so this remote place, ironically now, is very famous. Honey buzzards and goshawks, if you want to see those, that's where you go. And so it's actually a famous birding spot these days. And when I was 10, I went bird watching with my school teacher, Mr. Sutton. Because I knew something about birds from egg collecting, I was one of 4 lucky kids, got the opportunity to see an RSPB show, Royal Society for Protection of Birds. It was all slides back then, right? And so he took us out bird watching to Burton gravel pits. To be honest, the place was a dump, okay? There were very few birds there, but it did change my life forever. There were coots, but I often look back to that day and ask myself what changed everything. You see, I was good at sport. I was asked to sign professional papers at 14 for soccer and cricket. Broke every school record. But why did I choose birds over sport? Was it the beauty of the birds? The challenge of identifying them? The fact that I could do it 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, till the day I died? Was it because it would give me a license to travel the world? Probably the never-ending discovery, the unknown. I love the unknown. I hate what I know. And so the answer is, why is it? Truthfully, I'm not 100% sure, but certainly I was bitten. Some of you are still awake. It's a good this morning thing is good, okay. In any case, when I was 14, I went on my first twitch. A twitch is to see a rare bird in England. The Hudsonian godwit, the second record for Europe. And so I walked the 3/4 of a mile down a country lane to my school bus. I used to try and identify every bird. Obviously, I didn't have binoculars. I tried to identify them based on their size, their shape, their behavior, the vaguest of patterns of colour and probability. I was lucky. I had the best teacher in the world. Colour is the root of all evil in bird watching. Size, shape, behaviour, probability, and patterns of colour is how all the best birders in the world bird. Okay. In any case, I got on the school bus, got off at the school, and instead of going into school, went back out on the main road, hitchhiked the 40 miles to the ex-estuary. There were only about 70 birders watching the Hudsonian godwit. It had been there for a couple of weeks. The BBC cameras were there. In any case, the bird was there. It was in with some bar-tailed godwits. I got to watch it. Of course, in England, when you chase a bird and you see it, you don't watch it for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You watch it for 2 or 3 hours because you want to learn the bird, not the name. So when you see it again, you know how it lives, what it does, what it looks like. And so I got back out after 3 hours, went back on the road, got to school, got back to school before it closed, school bus, went home. I went out that night, very unusual for me. When I come back in, my parents ambushed me. Richard, where were you today? I was at school. How the hell did you find out? You were on the BBC One National News. The phone's been ringing off the hook. 9 o'clock the next morning, the buzzer went for school. 1 minute after 9, Richard Crossley to the principal's office. She was called a bone crusher McCardle. She'd been brought in to straighten out the school, you know. And she brought me in. I was a pretty well-known citizen because of all the sports stuff. And she let me have it for 15 minutes. Question after question. And at the end of it, I was a lot smarter back then. I looked down at my feet, just hummed and nodded. I kept my big mouth shut. But at 15 minutes, she said, Richard, what is more important to you, birds or schoolwork? I remember looking at her and just staring at her thinking, you stupid sod. In any case, she said nothing, she got it, and I was ushered out of the principal's office. I was beyond hope. In any case, 16, I decided I was going to the Isles of Scilly. Isles of Scilly are some islands 27 miles off the end of Land's End. And my parents said I wasn't going. I said I was. They said I wasn't. They found me 10 miles down the road hitchhiking. So my mum decided I was winning that one. So they took me to the ferry, caught the ferry, and there it was. There would be 1,500 to 2,000 men on the Isles of Scilly at any one time in October. 4 women typically. Yes, it was a young male dominated sport. And I wanted to be one of them. And as you do when you're, there's lots of stories. There were no phones back then. They used to put a huge flag up in the middle of the island when a rare bird showed up. And sometimes the news would trickle through when you were on one of the more remote islands. And that's where I was this day, when the news came through of high-browed thrush. We all needed it. There'd been a couple of records for Britain, but they'd only been seen by a couple of people. High-browed thrush looks like a lot like an American robin, and it was in a field with other thrushes. It was supposed to be easy to see. In any case, we got an early boat back, ran up to Salakey Farm, and stood in next to the field where it was. It was in with redwings and fieldfares. It was 4 o'clock. We had a couple of hours before dark, no problem. But with 20 minutes to go before it was going to be dark, we were desperate. When all of a sudden the shout came out, "Got it! Got it!" It was the other side of Salakey Farm. It had moved a couple of 100 yards. Now Salakey Farm, beautiful little place, little farmyard full of water, mud and cow muck. Colloquially called, no, I can't say what it's colloquially called, but in any case, you get the picture. So there's about 40 of us running through the farmyard. Now you either go right through the farmyard and the stuff flies everywhere, or you tiptoe around the edge. Well, of course, we needed it, so we go right through the farmyard, the stuff is flying everywhere, when all of a sudden, one of the guys goes down. There's a loud shout and a crack as one of his arms becomes 2. Now in life, you have choices. Do you stop for your friend, or do you keep running? In England, you keep running. In any case, everybody lived happily ever after. The guy was able to see the bird as well, so it was all good. But also in England, things are done differently, certainly back then. I went to the pub, 16 years old as you do, right? And it just so happened I sat next to a table full of England's best young birders in the early 20s. They were already legends, travelled all over the world, found incredible things, and I wanted to be like them, right? I'm a 16-year-old kid. But I was listening to them and they were talking a language I'd never heard before. I call it tertial talk. And they all had their notebooks. No field guides are allowed in England. If you take a book into the field in England, it's over. No serious birder ever takes a book in the field. You learn the bird. The bird that is in front of you is real. Books, even Crossley ID guides, are not real. Okay? So you have to look at the real things, the nuances, the movements, the size, the shape. And filling in those pieces of the puzzle, you will only ever do if you take field notes or sketch it. Photographing doesn't do it. And so you are forced to write down detailed notes. And the second I started taking field notes, my world changed. I learned to analyze things that stood me better in life later on, in business and everything else. And so I suggest if you really want to learn birds and appreciate them more, start writing them down, field notes. Again, for a beginning birder, a bird is a piece of a puzzle with 5 or 10 pieces. Intermediate birder, 30 or 40 pieces. A top-notch birder, 80 or 100 pieces. See if you can do it. You know what, I always forget why I put this image up there. Does anybody know what that is? Everybody knows what a blue jay looks like, right? Okay, I guess. Oh, I remember. What does a blue jay look like? Does it have a black tail or a blue tail? Or is it black and blue? Is the black wider than the blue or the blue wider than the black? And is there white in that black and blue tail? Close your eyes. Close your eyes. Imagine a blue jay. What's the wing pattern? Is the wing pattern black, blue, black, white and blue? And sketch the head pattern. And was that a male or a female? An immature or an adult? Can you do it? So you all know what blue jay looks like, right? Really? Who wants to describe in detail with 50 pieces what a blue jay looks like? Hands up. I thought so. Now in my talk, this is the first time that nobody ever gives a damn what I look like. Because everybody is looking at blue jay for the very first time. In any case, when I was 21, I went to Cape May. Beautiful place, beaches, Victorian sort, fantastic buildings. The night as well, it's the first time where the night lit up. Thousands of birds flying over. Birding is 24 hours a day there. And so everybody goes to the lighthouse. Big new Hawkwatch platform these days. When I went, it was a piddly little thing. Cape May is so brilliant because of the geography. It's the end of the road, the southern tip of New Jersey. And so nothing wants to fly over the water. It's a mosaic of habitats. Fresh water, salt water, bushes, trees, farmlands. One-stop shopping for everything. And of course it's where the Cape May warbler comes from. But Cape May warbler is a brilliant bird. Why? Because it confuses everybody. Because it has, if it was an adult male in summer plumage, it'd be much brighter than this. This is a dull one. Or we can go to much duller ones. See, everybody describes all the colours. If you describe the colours, you're going to be in problem. But Cape May warbler's a fat little thing. Okay, really pot-bellied without a neck, a little bill that's slightly decurved, fine at the base, and they all have like thin eye stripes and little superciliums. They all have wing bars, some thin, some really broad. But their size, their shape, their behaviour, it's always the same. But people want to learn their colours, which are always different. Not very smart. You can see colours everywhere if you're interested in colours. If you look. And it was there when I went back to a world that was like basically in the 1940s. The famous Cape May, 1985, nobody had a clue what was going on. People only looked at raptors. Nobody looked at warblers and all the other things that were going through. And would you believe it, nobody had noticed that in fall all the birds moved north. No, they moved south in fall. Not in Cape May. They all reorientate to the north in the morning. There's a massive flight through the bushes. So me and Paul Holt, another English guy, were obsessed with this flight. Where do you go to watch it? Hundreds, sometimes thousands of birds just after dawn take off to go back to the north. Everybody goes in the fields. We went the wrong way. And on September the 20th, 1985, we found it. The trees stopped. There was a big raised embankment just put there, especially for us, I think. We stood on the top of it, and as the sun rose, all hell would break loose. Yellow and warbler going right, Cape May, black and white, red starts going to the right, blackpoll, sorry, got the last one wrong, yellow warbler. It was like Space Invaders on steroids. Thousands of birds, the challenge of identifying them. Where were they coming from? Where were they going? And why? It was never ending, the opportunity to discover the unknown. And so, even on good nights, we would be sleepless in anticipation for the next morning. We told people we were laughed out of town. How could two English guys be over here for weeks and identify these small birds flying over? That's impossible. We came from a different school. The school of size and shape and behaviour and patterns, not of the minutiae of colour. And so we did it, and then very quickly people to understand this was no joke. And so it became the thing. And so one of the guys who's going to be speaking here with the cap on at the back is Dave Sibley. He moved into town to do it. It was cutting edge. It was the future. He moved there, Julian Huff. And sadly his ex-wife was the principal of Newtown in Connecticut for the shooting. Paul Holt, the guy lives behind Julian's head, lives in Baderhouse, one of the best birders in the world. And Deb there. And of course America was great for other things. They set up a platform there to watch this spectacle. We actually published a paper in the Oak 2 years later called Morning Flight. But since that day, really, we've learned nothing else. But again, the opportunity here is just fantastic. But America, I fell in love with it, a lot because of the flights, the morning flight, the migration. Visible migration in America is like nowhere else. But there's other things, hoagies, 24 hours a day, wow, I mean, oh my goodness. And they said the Hawkwatch platform, great social. Birding in America is way more social than England. And there's two types of birds, feathered and non-feathered. Not only do the birds over here watch young women watch birds, but they tattoo themselves. My God, what a world this is. In any case, became quite well known quite quickly, and a chapter in a book called The Season at the Point was written about me and identifying the warblers flying over. But one of my quotes was this: birding in America is 15 years behind England, and England is 15 years behind Sweden. Today, it is still like that. And so the opportunity to catch up and learn from others is great. And that's one of the things we talk about a lot. And so in the late 80s, I became a birding bum. I graduated at 21. I took a year off to go traveling, as you do in most of the rest of the world. My 1 year of traveling became 6 years, as sometimes these things happen. You know, so I birded, I spent 3.5 years in Asia, loved seeing the kids, they're the future. Spent nearly 2 years in Japan. This is with the Yamashina Institute from Ornithology, learned a lot. And I bought one of this book while I was out there. This book became very influential to me. It was different. Clearly, I wasn't getting it for the text. But look at the imagery, the different size photos. Birds facing left, birds facing right. Some birds up close, some distant. But then look at the big image on the right. It tells a story, right? The waves crashing in, the volcano on the background, the Pacific golden plover on the rocky foreshore. American golden plover, you're not really going to get out there. But it makes you want to be there. And so this would become the basis of the Shorebird Guide. When I lived in Cape May, we had huge parties at the house for birders and photographers. We'd squeeze nearly 100 people in, the best of the best, and I mean that, household names. And some of the best photographers would show their images. Come the third year, a lot of people said they didn't want to come. Why, I would ask? Because I'm sick of flat background photos that don't tell a story. And at the same token, I hid this book come the third year because it was getting ripped apart. People want to see images that told the story. I moved to Cape May in January '91 for good. But I often remember in the late 80s, I went there in a couple of springs, and it had a big influence on me. See, the horseshoe crabs and the red knot story is very well known. I remember going to the famous Reeds Beach, being very disappointed. I was told it would be full of birds, and when I was 100 yards away, it was empty. All it was full of pebbles. Except when I got closer, I noticed the pebbles were moving, a mosaic of colours. there was no beach. Just birds acting as pebbles. But that would quickly change. And so when I was in there in the 90s, by the mid-90s, that 130,000 red knot had gone to 13,000. In fact, semi-palmated sandpipers, sandalins and ruddy turnstones had similar declines. Why? Because a group of fishermen had gone onto the beach with their pickup trucks and taken off their horseshoe crabs in droves. They could make a few dollars selling them to be made for makeup and different other things. And they always say one person can't make a difference. I disagree with that. See, one gentleman called Larry Niles at the time worked for the state. I guess he felt the state wasn't doing enough. Neither was New Jersey, Audubon or anybody else. And so this gentleman set about getting a team of world researchers. Larry Niles is very opinionated and upsets people. That's what good conservationists do. Conservation, you have to fight and upset people. But you also look at the team that they get around him. He had a team of nearly 100 people in the end who came year after year at massive personal expense to fight for the cause. Thankfully today, the Delaware Bay is doing very good, very much thanks to Larry Niles and some others, but particularly him. And so he's a great role model to me. There are other role models as well. I remember my parents would come and visit me in Cape May, and all of a sudden, my mum started screaming, "It's Bill! Oh my God, it's Bill!" I'd never heard my mum scream for another guy. And if she did, I really didn't expect her to scream for a fat, grey-haired, 5'4" guy. But Bill Oddie is Bill Oddie. He was one of the goodies, famous TV show. And then he started doing wildlife TV programs on TV that, in my opinion, changed bird and conservation to a large degree. He isn't the only one who was on TV all the time. You may know the name Attenborough. But Britain has probably 8-10 household wildlife personalities. We did have one, Steve Irwin, the worst day in American conservation when he passed away. But until we have wildlife personalities, conservation will never be anything over here. People have to get sold, be brought into it. And it's these people make it fashionable to the young people, tomorrow's game changers. So it's my dream we can make that happen. You see, birding in the 70s and 80s looked like this. Birding in the 90s started to look like this. And there's a lot more than that today. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, the RSPB, has 1.2 million members. That's the equivalent of 6 million members over here. That's twice the size of the NRA, and they have twice the clout. They own 0.5% of England, and they think they're small, because the National Trust, the equivalent of the Nature Conservancy, has 10% of England as its members. So this connection to the outdoors and nature is far greater. And as I tell people, what's the difference between England and America? And these are the only differences. In England, there are barely any birds. You can't get remotely close to them. They're almost impossible to identify. There are no sports teams named after birds, and it's always chucking it down with rain. Other than that, everything's the same. My point is this. America has every advantage. We just don't use it. And so with this like this, we were just talking to somebody about China. This is China now. Okay, a place that killed birds has more birders than what we do. Bird clubs everywhere. Okay, now the Yellow Sea, good pal Graham White was sent into the Yellow Sea to try and turn it around, saved it, because a major disaster, just like the Delaware Bay. A couple of weeks ago, he just told me now that actually in China, they're taking building down and actually sending it back to wetlands, because they realise just how important it is. So that is fantastic, how parts of the world are moving forward. And it really is, the world is moving forward. Never fast enough for me, but still great. And the future of birding is always the kids. My kids are grown up now, but they were young once upon a time. Seems like yesterday. That's Sam on the right there, the little one. Okay, and Sophie on the left. You'll hear about Sophie. She co-authored ornithotherapy, we'll talk about in a bit. But because my kids were in school, we went to the schools and got them involved with birds. I'm always told that young kids are not interested in birds or nature. It's really the more general, not just birds. It's a crock. They are. We don't put them in touch with it. It's our fault, not theirs. Everybody needs to be sold. Every other sport in the world is sold. We don't sell it. We have to do it. We have to make celebrities and create a connection and understand what they want. And we actually did a 5-page article, or Sophie did, with Ranger Rick magazine, celebrating the bird race. And so, you know, the birding went off the roof. We set up a bird club in a local school. We capped it off at 80 kids who wanted to be members of the bird club. We had 5 teachers and 80 kids. And that's where we capped it. So the potential is there. We just have to do it and do it the right way. And so, you know, we actually got lots of competition. The Audubon Society hated it. And there's one thing over here, we're all allies. Conservation comes with numbers, comes with working together. Birding needs to be 10 times bigger. Nobody owns birding and conservation. In any case, I had spent 15 years refusing to be interviewed, refusing to do any public speaking. And on this particular day, before the kids were about to get their award for winning the bird race for their age group, I decided to come out of the closet and speak publicly. I made a complete hash of it, as I often do, got very emotional. I'm frequently reminded about it, but I had something I felt was worth talking about for the first time. But what I also learned is, when you do talk about it, whoever you are, people are listening. It sometimes seems like you're not having an effect, but you never know, okay? And so, ironically, I talked to this guy, Tim Keyes. I'd forgotten the discussion, and I pulled up this email years later. Tim Keyes is a bit of an inspiration to me, because after this little chat, he went off and set up a bird race. And when I was in Georgia about 10 years later, there was a stream of kids coming to get books signed, of all colours, of all ages, mostly from 4 hours away in Atlanta. Okay, but they'd all made this effort to come down to Jekyll Island. And how did you get into birding? How did you get into birding? The bird race, the bird race, the bird race. What's the bloody bird race? In any case, it's something we'd talked about, I'd forgotten about. And so we set up Race for Birds. I couldn't get any organisation to do it. I tried and I tried. I had a big fighting match, swearing and everything with one organisation, because they even refused to promote it. Why would you not promote kids birding? I didn't get it. In any case, so we did that, and we also set up a global bird initiative called Pledge to Fledge. The first one, we had events in 43 countries around the world. It became too big, too quick, so we gave it to Cornell, and unfortunately, they didn't run with it like they were supposed to do, but what are you going to do, right? In any case, the kids are the future. I do believe that it's out there, but we have to sell it better and differently, and learn. You know, technology today is such a key. You know, this particular day, we had 130 kids from the Philadelphia region coming down, most of them with binoculars. So the potential is massive. In any case, I built my dream house in Cape May. That was my office on the 3rd floor. The family took me out of that because I was up there all the time. It's the best hawk watch in Cape May. That was my hawk watch platform. So lots of good birds from up there. Unfortunately, I was working too much and very rarely used it. You know, and we got to talk to some people. You know, but I always say everybody's a closet birder. We just need to bring them out of the closet. And I just think this is a good example. So the bloke reading the book is then Governor Christie, right? I mean, he's supposed to be working and meeting people, right? But he's obviously looking at a good bird book, so he's smart. The mayor there is also looking at the bird book. But most importantly here is the 2 guys with the shades on the left. Now, they're supposed to be looking after the big guy, but they are watching a flock of blue jays go past. In any case, I'd been asked to be involved with books and different stuff and always said no, but this time when I was asked to be involved with the Shorebird Guide, I took the dive. But it was like everything I do, I try and start from scratch and say that everything is wrong. So we looked at birds, particularly Michael and O'Brien and myself. We spent a lot of time looking at birds and really thinking about, you know, what average birders looked at, or beginning birders. Not what we looked at, because we weren't really typical. So we tried to get to grips with that and look at things more closely and from a different perspective. But for me, birding is always visual. It's about making people drool. We got volunteers and asked them how they looked at birds as well. Oh, come on! Are we that PC today? And of course, the most influential person in my life was my dad. He's not a birder. Of course, he was a farmer, loved the outdoor, would always go on about getting me to look at nature, but not into birds, though today he's obsessed with how house sparrows build their nests. See, birding and nature is different things to different people. In America, we have an obsession with names and lists. It's completely wrong. Why is there this obsession? Because you are constantly being sold it by eBird these days. It is not good. Okay? And so, you know, look at things. And my dad was an inspiration because when he was 58 years old, he decided he was going to start painting. It's never too late. Ironically, he said, Richard, lad, I said, Dad, at first he did watercolours, very soft colours, and they got bigger, bolder, and brighter. And I said, Dad, why don't you keep it duller? And this is so bright. But it took me 3 months, perhaps 6 months, to grow into his paintings. When all of a sudden I loved it more abstract, brighter. See, it takes time for us to learn things. Like Crossley ID guides, they're so different. But with time you do. Ironically, my dad would say art is just a pleasing pattern of colours and shapes. And that is just how I look at birding. Ironically, when I would show him detail paintings, he would say this, what's the point? You might as well take a bloody photo. In any case, we couldn't get the photos from around the world, from every photographer that we knew to get the photos we needed. Back then it was just slides. We needed these group photos. So I became a photographer. I was not a photographer. I repeat that, I became a photographer. I learnt it, and I did it wrong, but we'll get into that. But we needed all these flight shots and group shots, and nobody had them. So I bought a fancy lens and went out, and I did it wrong. Back then, everybody used a tripod and fill flash. Fill flash is a lie. It makes the colours prettier, but it's not real. That's not how you look at the colours of a bird in real life. And then, what's the tripod for? I'm following this bird that's flying at 30 miles an hour, and the camera's following the bird. What's the tripod doing? And of course, it slows you down, so I dumped the tripod. I got hell for it. A couple of top photographers really screamed me out. And it's like, you just think you're going to point a camera and click a button and shoot? I'm like, yeah, something like that. And sure enough, I actually wrote a thing, dump the gear in, good birders don't like. Ironically, who the heck uses a tripod and fill flash today? So it's good that it's changed. In any case, I did photograph the shots in. I'd usually go, no, I don't usually go like that, but camouflage is good. In any case, I was from Cape May, so we did some surfing from England. We put some fog in there, the minutiae of feathers. Everybody's interested in eating. I tried to make some money from advertising, but I'm still working on that. And of course, people want to know about bills and everything else. Why is the lower mandible shorter than the upper mandible? So we would explain it in the shortcut in the book. And of course, pretty colours, patterns of life, nature, we all love that. Recognise it, seeing it. It was really great with the camera. It really does make you see things differently. So what was different about the Shorebird Guide? Everything. We started as we do with people. And the distance, we see birds in the distance, so that's how we should start. In their habitat, different poses. So black-bellied plovers, or grey plovers as we call them in England, that's how I see them, in the distance like that, not up close. And of course we start with juveniles, bottom left. We don't start with bright adult males that we rarely see. Start with juveniles. As they molt, they go through a progression in life. So the top right, birds molt, so showing those dark feathers in the wingtips and explaining everything. In England, every image was explained, why it looked the way it looked. In America, nothing was ever explained. It was like we want to keep people in the dark, keep them dumb almost, keep them blind. And so we really changed that. And you need comparative images, right? So you could see size and shape next to other things. Books didn't do that at the time. Just side-on, flat backgrounds, chosen by bird photographers, not birders. Completely wrong. That's why bird photography books were always really bad. Wrong. And in any case then, the image on the right there, sorry, was again, if you remember the Japanese guide, near and far. We tried to make every background a different colour. So orange, blue, green. One image will be lots of birds. The next image, just one bird. Every image had to be as different as possible from the previous image. This was a polar opposite of every other book that said everything had to be the same. 3x2s facing the same way, same size. That is not what nature is the way I see it. Do you see it like that? Absolutely no. And so we had to keep people's interest. So that was the goal of that. In any case, as I said, I did it all wrong. But towards the end of the Shorebird Guide, I decided that was wrong, because it was not lifelike. The images were not all in focus, okay? And it's so hard to capture the complete life story of a bird. So I had this dream, this vision of creating this new thing that was lifelike. Because if you're going to practice at anything and be good at it from that practice, it's got to be lifelike. So what does lifelike look like? It has to be in focus from near to far. And I was lucky, you see, digital photography and Photoshop had come along. And those two things had made everything possible. And I love them. Ladies, stand back, get back. No. And of course, as I've said, colour is the root of all evil, so I'm all different colours, you know. So I have my breeding plumage and non-breeding plumage, but sadly, my size and shape doesn't change much, you know, or my voice or my passion for things. But I asked a lot of the top authors in the world what was the purpose of their guide. Not one could give me a proper answer. You know, is it to help people become better? Is it to give them a quick fix name? Most field guides' objective is for you to be able to identify, to put a name on some of the birds that you see. That is not the goal of Crossley ID Guides. The goal of Crossley ID Guides is to help you better understand what you're looking at. The complete picture. To practice in a place where the birds don't fly away, but that when you go out into the environment where they're moving, you are much better prepared. So you have learned the environment, how they feed, what they do. You've been able to see them from near and far, to see the big picture. And so when you go out into the field, you can prepare yourself. I'm going to see a blue grosbeak. So you're going to know the environment, what they do. These are massive clues that books don't teach you. And again, there are more examples from near to far. So you can practice with a glass of wine or a bottle of beer. One of the other advantages, right? And so my books are too big to take into the field. That was not by accident, contrary to what some people might think it was a mistake. Get real, you know? And so, yeah, look at it before you go out. Look at it after you come back. But look at the bird in the field. And so, if you look at how the brain learns, you know, it's repetition, lifelike, and multiple things. We don't need to go into them. But if you look at that, field guides are basically wrong. And yet we continue to use them, and we ask the question, why aren't I getting any better? It's pretty damn obvious, okay? And so this is the best field guide in the world. It's the Collins Guide, okay? And, you know, I know all the guys, but Killian Milani, the artist, is one of my best friends. But what makes it the best? Because it shows a more complete picture than most guides. You know, so it's got the bird. See, for me, hawk owl is the top right image. It's the spindly tree. It sits at the top. The image on the left, they always fly up really steep. I don't need to see all that minutiae of the hawk owl. I know where they live and how they live and what they do. And so if you know that, you can identify a hawk owl half a mile away without binoculars as it flies to a tree. Behavior we get, habitat we get, minutiae we don't get, and yet it tells us to focus on that. It's just all wrong. We look to be voyeurs of people. I ask you to be a voyeurs of nature. Learn their personalities, their lifestyles. Ranger Rick magazine published this. Why is this such a big deal? Because Ranger Rick magazine will only accept original images. It will not take any altered images of any kind. So to go from that to an image made up of 15 images that's photoshopped to whatever, they had 4 board meetings. So this was a very proud day for me, one of my proudest. So I asked Susan McElhenney, I'm like, what was the deciding factor? The deciding factor to go with it, even though it goes against everything that we preach in photography, is that photographs don't influence the kids like they're supposed to do, like they should do. We have to make them more lifelike, and we know that this kind of imagery is much better. I actually got MIT to try and do a test, but unfortunately after talking multiple conversations it didn't happen. Because the future is about learning, about getting better. So what was different about the book? National Audubon first sentence, everything. And that was by intentional. So I went whole hog. So first thing is how to be a good birder, how to be the best birder. No book had said it. So if you read the introduction of my guides, it tells you how to bird like the best. Much of what I'm talking about today, you know. But most people don't read introductions, but you should. It's really important. Taxonomy, it's changed since we've been talking, and will change again today. Why? Because we don't know. But taxonomy, what's that got to do with birding? For me, not a lot. For me, birding is about a habitat. Everything is about the food and the habitat. A bird's size, its shape, its behavior, its patterns of colour are all linked to how and where it lives. I'll repeat that. A bird's size, its shape, its behavior, its patterns of colour are all linked to how and where it lives. It's all connected. And so a number of the top authors got together and sort of said, listen, we need to be doing books by habitat. Okay? Because that determines everything, their appearance, how they live, where they live. And so that's what we did. Swimming waterbirds, walking waterbirds, flying waterbirds. Of course, a lot of that follows taxonomic lines, but it makes more sense to all of us. And so the next big guy that comes out will be, I'm not sure what they're going to call it, but the artist is Ian Lewington, an English guy who's brilliant. So it's been in the works for nearly 10 years already, but it will be very similar to the Collins guide. Yeah, it's not as good as a Crossley ID guide because it's pains and all that, but never mind. But it will be, again, they will follow this as well. So it will be the wave of the future. And then I put a little book within the big book, 14 pages every species. So I often tell people, go cut all the pages out, you can take it into the field. And you might ask yourself, why would I say that? And the answer's simple. Then you've got to buy 2 books. Still got some of you, that's all right. So I got the introduction, but as I said, when people saw the plates, people were completely confused. Oh my goodness, I should have taped some of the conversations I overheard. What's that? Is that a photo? Is it a painting? But it's something that shows the complete lifestyle of a bird, where it lives. So on the left, the oystercatcher, they always fly in 2s, 4s, 6s in pairs, in tight flocks, calling. You know, it doesn't matter about the colours, you can do that at a mile away as silhouettes. Good birders identify 90% of the birds of the sea without ever seeing colour. Okay? How? Because again, because of the habitat. A black-necked still has long legs. Why? Because they live out in the water. Okay? Birds with short legs usually on the dry ground. So if you know these clues, it's great. And as I said, repetition is also key to learning. But ultimately, the other day, it is hoped that you just enjoy looking at the images that tell a story, right? Because at the end of the day, it is the beauty of nature that really captures us, the celebration of birds and everything else. And the more you can see it, the more you will appreciate it. The more you appreciate it, the more you will conserve it. And from that we moved on. So when you do single species groups like raptors, you know, you can do lots of mystery photos and celebrate their behaviour even more. Very sadly, probably the best raptor guy in North America, co-author Jerry Ligori, just passed away a few weeks ago. Brilliant guy, he taught me so much, not just about raptors, but about writing. It's very sad, but he was probably the healthiest person I ever knew. And never, you know, he would only eat certain things, exercise, perfect specimen. It just seems so ironic that he would die of Lou Gehrig's disease, you know, just the worst thing, you know. Criminal shame. The other co-author is Brian Sullivan, great guy, works for Cornell. But again, so that we could celebrate, you know, the life stories of these birds, how they live, ospreys. You know, so just understanding when they dive, the force with which they hit the water going everywhere. You know, they get out the water, they give their little cells a shake to get rid of the water. They turn the fish around, right, head first. The soles of the feet are designed to grip the bird. You know, everything in nature is for a purpose. And that's the fun of it. People get, always first question is, what is the species? What's the bird? That's a terrible question. Forget it. Learn the bird. What's it doing? What's it look like? Always ask yourself questions you can think about. If it's a yes or no, I know, I don't know, it's terrible. If you know the name, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you know the bird. So try and forget that question, get rid of it. It is the root of all evil, and we have to get rid of it. And should we show birds near, far, sitting, you know, celebrate? Look at this. How many birds fly in big flocks like that? Basically, broad-winged hawks or Swainsons. Just the volume of them alone tells you it's one of two species. Of course, we put a couple of mystery photos in there you've got to find. If you can't see the Swainsons hawk, obviously you're going to have to buy the book outside afterwards. Seeing stuff from different angles. And again, all the blackbirds that you might see in South Texas. And again, not knowing is how you learn. So you've always got to be asking questions. Birding is about asking questions. It is not about knowing answers. The best birders are the best for two reasons. They have asked 1 million more questions than anybody else in here. And they've got the answers wrong more than anybody else in here. That's how they've got better. So when you think you don't know, that's a brilliant thing. Keep asking the questions and celebrate the discovery. And, you know, just learning the light. Just look at the light. Everything you see, ask a question. Or better still, ask 3 questions. You know, when I look into the sun, most people look the other way. Look at it. Learn how birds look in the sun. It's fun. It's exciting. And as I tell people, don't look at birds. Don't look at colour. It's just patterns of colour. Where it's lightest, where it's darkest. And of course, the beauty of nature is really what it's all about. This is the only text I actually wrote was in this for this image. So it's to celebrate nature. I guess I'm going on a little bit long. Okay, so we did the Britain and Ireland guide, all the same thing, you know, just near, far. And I always tell people, you don't need to go to England. You can look at Britain and Ireland through the guide. So just the same. We did the waterfowl guide. You're going to have to come to another talk. The waterfowl guide, I actually drove up to Prudhoe Bay, 16,000 mile trip, got to see great things. This is a boreal owl, a young one. I took all my friends with me, mosquitoes. Everything in nature is about food. So birds travel around the world for one thing, so that they're in July for the mosquitoes to feed the youngsters. Pretty incredible, really. I did have a full head of hair before I went there. So the waterfowl guide is actually probably my favourite guide, because waterfowl are just my, you know, just incredible things. And it's the first book I self-published. So, you know, sex sells, so I had to put some sex in there, right? But again, we can celebrate it, you know, so colour. Look at the colour here. This is, you know, what colour is a mallard's head? Well, it depends on the light. If it's backlit, it's green, but if you look into the sun, it's black. If you look at 90 degrees, it's purple or blue. And so just understanding these things is interesting. Again, sex sells, but just how birds fly. And, you know, basically looking at a video in slow motion. We put double page images in flight from near to far again. So who was the book for? Everybody. Hunters, birders, the parent that takes their kid down to the duck pond. You see, as I said before, conservation is about being one. Everybody coming together. We're not separate, we're the same. We all have one thing in common. We love the outdoors. And we all have different tools. Binoculars, cameras, telescopes, guns, fishing rods. But the one thing we all use those tools for is so we can be out in nature when you really look at it. So we need to come together and celebrate that so we can protect it. And again, just, you know, I love water, how water splashes up. But if you look at this image here, look at the tail bottom left, how it's bent, but when it gets vertical, it goes upright, sort of interesting. Watch how they land with their legs splayed, pushed forward, doing a belly flop. And just the patterns of water, bottom right, how when the bird lands, the water all just sprays out in a certain pattern. You know, nature is incredible. Nothing more than the one group of birds, because everybody says hunters are bad. Hunters do more for conservation than any group of conservationists. And as an English person who hates the gun, who all people in Europe fight the gun terribly because there's indiscriminate shooting of birds in the Mediterranean, it's having a massive impact. And so for me to say that is a huge thing. But the ignorance, I was ignorant for a long time of just what a job, you know, Ducks Unlimited and groups like that do, and what they do for conservation. And in the last decade, I've really got to understand, and don't have the time to go into it here, but they do a truly, truly remarkable job. And so this image here is really just celebrating nature as well. So look at the beauty of the eider. These are the different eiders that we used to put in our eider down to keep us warm, that breed up in the high Arctic. But again, the discovery. So one thing, when I started looking at them, they all have some things in common. Every one of them has black around the eye. Why? Because they live in the ice and the snow. What do baseball players do at night? It's to stop the reflections, right? But not only that, common eider, when you get to the far north, they have a black V under the chin. Just like king eider. Why? Obviously for the very same reason. So this is just something you can work out. Am I right? I don't know. But I put a bloody lot of money on it. And so if you look at the patterns of nature and dig deeper and deeper, it makes complete not sense. So again, it's everybody can learn things if we think about it. And so the last book I did was the Western Guy. got a lot of trouble for actually doing waterfowl first. Why? Because I want to bring these groups together, okay? We didn't quite accomplish it. Ducks Unlimited, at one point, we're going to publish the book and have all the birders go on Ducks Unlimited, but it didn't work out. That was a big dream of mine. In any case, so the Western Guy's just been out not long, which is, you would like to think all the books are getting better, right? So hopefully it's the best of the books. And again, the same thing, just like the Eastern Guide. And I always tell people, if you took the birds out, would you like the backgrounds? Hopefully, yes. And so, COVID has been, we can describe it in many ways, right? But, it's like, well, everybody's stuck inside. To me, birding always begins in your backyard. That's everything to me, because it's the place you see every day. It's where you get to know the birds. And it's great to understand what's going in your backyard. That's the foundation for everything else. And with COVID, there was an opportunity like no other, because everybody was stuck in their rooms, right, looking out their windows. And I've always preached that's, where birding begins and ends, basically. And so we set up a Facebook group with Holly Merker. My daughter Sophie was stuck on an island, a small island off Thailand, poor thing, free diving. no mafia. It was mafia controlled, so there was no COVID. She was stuck in utopia, and you know, because of FaceTime and all this today, we could all talk together. So because of the Facebook reaction to ornithotherapy group we set up, we decided to do a book. You know, between the three of us, we were able to do it in months, basically, on every day. So it was a great opportunity, and so we put this book out, Ornithotherapy. So Holly Merker, you got to come next week. You got to tell your friends. She's a brilliant speaker, much better than what I am, and she really connects with people. So I'm not going to get into ornithotherapy today, other than to tell you to come next week. It really talks about looking at birds much more closely, how to do it. This book actually walks you through it, but then not only look how to look at birds, but then how you, through introspection, you really see yourself differently, because we're all animals. And being in the moment is really tough. It gets harder and harder today, but it really helps you to be in the moment and be mindful. And so, it's really helpful. As we have Mr. Fitch here from Europe, he'll tell you. In the rest of the world, they're far, far further ahead than what we are with connecting people to birds. But understanding how helpful wildlife is to our health, how vital it is to our health. Forget the damn drugs that you put in your mouth. This is the best drug out there. Sunlight and connecting to nature. But being able to connect to nature better is really important, to understand it and really watch it. And so Holly will talk about that. In any case, people often ask me, you know, where is birding in North America today? Well, we're still a long way behind, but the opportunity is great. You know, there are so many more young birders today than what there were 15 years ago. And they all communicate together, and with technology, they will change the future. But it's important that we get the dialogue, that we learn from the rest of the world, from the RSPBs and others who do a much better job of connecting with nature and working together. And so I think the future of conservation, the future of wildlife and birds is in a great place. You know, the guy who's come up for a bit of stick recently, which I hate, is a guy called Roosevelt. That guy changed this country. He saved so much land, not just him but others as well. But he was the catalyst. Europe and the rest of the world completely messed it up. We didn't save those blocks of land. So as a result, everything is more focused over there because we have to go to the end and come backwards. America started right at the beginning, saved massive tracts of land, which is the most important thing. But we are doing a bad job of connecting people to that land. So that is what we have to change and learn from others. Because, like with the Delaware Bay, tomorrow comes so quickly. Only takes years to get rid of things, you know? And so, you know, all in all, we're good, but we have to keep moving forward. And so I'm going to end, I started with a little song to wake you up, right? And so I'm going to end with a poem. I don't have a favourite bird, but there is one bird that we have lots of commonalities. We're all animals, and me and this bird, we're tied, we're the same damn thing. So this poem is called Who We Are. See if you recognise the bird, because you get it around here. We're short, broad, and chunky. We live by the beach. We both run too fast for most people to reach. We've travelled the world. There is so much to learn. Differences, beauty, and untruths. Tonight, I hope you thought it was your turn. But despite our life of always on the run, it is down by the shore where we have our fun. The rocks, the surf, the sun, the sand, the differences, the tricks of light, they all go hand in hand. So thank you for travelling the world with me tonight, because it is my dream that one day we will all get it right. Thank you very much for tuning in.
try this way, there we go. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Richard, for your wonderful presentation. We love when you come here, and there's such a unique perspective to birding that I think a lot of us could learn a lot more about. I know I truly don't want to go back to my office. I want to go out on Indigo Trail or something, so I'd highly encourage everyone else to do that because I can't. But I think there were some great themes in that presentation. Mindfulness. We're kicking off our Wellness Week next week, so a couple of you heard from Dr. Joe Blanda last week, and we'll be unveiling our mindfulness trail at the Bailey Track next week. So I hope we see you Monday morning. And then also, it's all about the kids. We're really enthusiastic about getting this next generation out there. Our Wildlife on Wheels reached over 10,000 people last year safely during COVID. We're very proud of it. Thank you, yes. And it's just all about that we really need to get these themes out to people because everyone does better when we all work together for conservation. So thank you so much for caring. We don't have time for questions, but Richard will be signing books for about 20 minutes outside. So thank you again for coming, and have a great rest of your day.